Traders, how are you? Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today, we're going to recap the markets and what happened in the world last week. Overall, we have a situation where things are still a little bit crazy, right? We still have the coronavirus pandemic, but we do have some good news that happened during the week. Don't forget to, if you guys like the videos that I do weekly, don't forget to leave your like here on YouTube or even on the podcast. Don't forget to leave all your questions with the hashtag AskMarcello. Also, don't forget to subscribe here and leave the notifications on if you guys like to continue seeing these videos. If you guys remember, on Monday in the early morning, I talked about the crash that I was expecting on Monday due to the comments with Warren Buffett. So I saw some of your comments saying, oh, you should drop the video because you look like an idiot, etc., etc. Actually, I'll leave the video on. Sometimes we can't be right 100%, but we did get a huge crash overnight, which what I was expecting to continue. In the afternoon around 12 p.m., 1 p.m., we actually saw a recovery due to the stimulus and everything else that's going on in the world. So I wasn't completely wrong, but I was half right. So we'll leave it like that. Other than that, we had some more news about Trump threatening more tariffs on China, and a lot of ongoing bad economic news. On Tuesday, the markets did end higher. Oil prices surged higher as well, as many states and countries are starting to make their plan to ease the coronavirus-led restrictions. One of the things I think that's important to consider is, Warren Buffett always says, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. When we had that huge crash in oil, if you guys want me to do a video about what happened, I'll definitely upload it for you so you can understand where oil went negative for the May contract. We had the crash. I did the dividend video that I did for you guys as well, talking about if you were able to time it perfectly. A lot of these big oil companies, you would have been getting now 15, 18% dividends other than Shell because they slashed their dividend. But if you would have diversified, right, you would have been able to still continue to have a great investment as Warren Buffett normally does with these dividends. And remember, for educational purposes only, this is not trading advice. We're not trading advisors. I don't trade people's money. So remember to do the research to do what's best for you guys and your accounts as well. On Wednesday, stock market ended mixed. On Thursday, we had higher markets as well. We had a surprise rise in Chinese exports that's indicated that the recovery of the economy may be a little bit faster than we anticipated. The NASDAQ, which is a technological stock exchange in the U.S., turned positive, and also a lot of Americans braced for the numbers of the unemployment benefits last week. They finally came out and they were not very nice at all. Markets began pricing in the negative U.S. interest rate environment for the first time ever as well. And on Friday, U.S. stocks ended higher. Signs of improving relations with the U.S. and China boosted investor sentiment. And we also had solid gains for the week, even after the historic job losses due to the coronavirus crisis. For the week, the Dow's up 2.56%, Dow's 14.74% for the year. S&P 500 is up 3.5% for the week, down 9.32% for the year. The NASDAQ is down 6% for the week, although it's up now 1.66% for the year. I don't know what you guys think, but we're kind of in Frankenstein land because, we have this horrible economic news and the markets are literally just continuing to skyrocket to the upside. So this is the challenge, and the reason why I like to do these videos for you, so you can understand how to put things together. And essentially the reason why the markets are going up is because we have this huge $3 trillion stimulus from the government helping everybody out, just sending money anywhere. And that essentially is what's really propping up a lot of these companies, even though even in the S&P 500, there's a very small group of companies that are going up while the majority have not been doing that well. Euro markets overall are mixed for the week. The FTSE in London was the biggest winner at 3%. Istanbul markets was the biggest loser at 3.33%. In Latin America, the Merval was the biggest winner. Huge run up, 10.5%. And the Colcap and my dearest Colombia was the biggest loser at 2.86% negative. Africa and the Middle East, Nigeria the biggest winner, 4.44%. Saudi Arabia the biggest loser, negative 7.30%. And in Asia, the Sensex in India was the biggest loser at 6.55%. With all my traders in the Philippines, the Philippine market went down 1.4%. In Bitcoin, we have huge news with the terms of the halving. Every time that we've had the situation occur in the past, Bitcoin has definitely seen a run up. So far for the week, it's higher by 11.42%. It got to just over 9,880 as of Friday evening. Financial and banking news, the Treasury is going to borrow a record $3 trillion in quarter two. I did a video in Spanish side about the upcoming dollar collapse and the economic collapse, because we never really solved the problems from before. And they come from a lot earlier than 2008. Everybody just thinks about, well, the market crashed. And it's really not, I know most of us are a little bit, tired, let's say, of the whole political stuff, yelling at each other left and right all the time. And it really doesn't matter what side you're on. The government as a whole, whether it's right or left, has really messed up our future. And I wanted to do a video explaining actually what happened. It actually goes back all the way to Clinton, even before that as well. But I think Clinton is really the one that kind of let's say kick the domino, and and I don't, not just Clinton, because it's everybody's fault as well in my opinion, but it's definitely something that's going to come back to bite us, because we're not only selling our children's future, but we're also selling our great children's futures as well. So the U.S. Treasury is going to borrow $3 trillion in quarter two. Add to that $477 billion in quarter one, $677 billion in quarter three. Massive deficit spending. We're reaching $25 trillion in debt in the U.S. without the unfunded liabilities like Social Security and everything else. So it's definitely a lot higher than that. Some analysts are actually worried about a debt crisis. Yeah. Duh. Other than that, the Norway's central bank has decided to drop their interest rates for the third time in 2 months. They've brought it down to zero, and they also said that they're likely to stay there for quite a bit of time, several years, they said, due to the economic devastation from the coronavirus and the collapse in oil prices. Argentina, which has had an economic and financial crisis every 10 years, is now pushing talks with creditors to try to renegotiate their $65 billion debt that they have, to be able to try to restructure it. They're heading for the 9th sovereign debt default in the world. I think it's important for us to look at the decisions that countries like Argentina make, because at the turn of the century in the 1900s, Argentina was known as one of the best countries in the world. I just did an interview recently with my favorite investor in the world, Jim Rogers, and he talked about how at the turn of the century, the best place to be was Argentina or the U.S. And so, they definitely have not made good decisions, even though the U.S. is kind of headed in that same direction now. Treasury yields near record lows on Friday due to the ongoing uncertainty and the economic impact of the pandemic and the massive borrowing. The 2-year has actually went to an all-time low to 0.08%. We saw a situation where crude saw a huge jump overall this week. The percentages seem like really big numbers. I told you guys, remember the last few weeks, don't worry so much about the percentage of how much oil is going up, because since the value of oil is so low, it kind of seems like a big number. It went up 25.07% this week. It really only reflects about $5 rise. For the year, it's still down just under 60%. International Brent went up 17.13% to just under $31, even though it's still down just over 53% for the year. And all of this is due to the fact that Saudi Arabia and OPEC continued more production cuts. The U.S. is reducing output, obviously, because they can't afford oil being so low. And so due to the oversupply, essentially the demand has literally collapsed. Now the oversupply is starting to go a little bit lower. So now we're starting to get a little bit of movement there in oil. Precious metals are mixed on Friday after gold hit a 7-year high. 3 weeks ago, it reached 1,733. The historic high was 1,921 in 2011. As due to the uncertainty is what's going on in the world, a lot of investors are looking for safety. Silver went up 0.75%. It had a recent high of 1890. And I talked about this as well over the last few years. As some of you guys have been following me for a while, talked about the opportunity in gold and silver, some of the best opportunities in 2018 or 17. And I think we're going to see that now. There's a huge premium for gold and silver coins if you can find them. Gold for the week stayed flat at 1,703. Silver went up 3,000. Silver went up 3.59% to $15.58. And in economic news, new orders for U.S. factory-made goods fell by more than expected in March. No surprise there, right? Even though the analysts were expecting a negative 9.7% and went down 10.3%. And it could fall even further due to the coronavirus pandemic and the disruptions, self-inflicted disruptions, I should add. Private employee payrolls went down by 20.24 million versus the expected 20.1 million estimates. More indication that the severe U.S. recession is starting. Remember that the recession is classified as 2 quarters that are negative number for GDP or a contraction. So the numbers officially came out for January, February, March, which is the first quarter, and we're definitely going to have a negative quarter due to the pandemic and the quarantines. Literally the economy stopped on a dime. So they're going to confirm it, but later, even though I'm letting you know that we're officially in a recession now. We probably will recover, I would say, somewhere around November and December. So the numbers of the growth will actually not come out until 2021. And if this continues overall, the Trump presidency might come to an end as well. Now remember, I don't get political on the show ever. It doesn't matter if you're left, right, black, white, purple, from Mars, doesn't matter. I always try to present the facts, as a lot of analysts were saying that he would still win. But as the economy continues to deteriorate, if it doesn't recover, then Trump is going to have a harder chance getting the re-election. Other than that, over 3.1 million Americans filed for new applications for unemployment last week. The U.S. economy continued to be stagnant due to the government-ordered business closures from the coronavirus. The last claims bring the total new applications for jobless benefits at about 33 million in mid-March. The U.S. Federal Reserve have also stated that don't expect a V reaction, or I should say, the way they said it is not to expect a quick return to growth, even though due to the fact that a lot of states now and other countries are looking to start to reopen their economies. In corporate news, the good old Warren Buffett lost $50 billion in quarter one, not to his avail. He still has $137 billion in cash. Can you imagine having that kind of cash just lying around waiting for some, on Monday, most airlines went down by 6 to 9% as he divulged that he liquidated all of his airline stocks. He also admitted that the $6.5 billion that he invested into the airlines was a mistake, and Berkshire Hathaway, which is his company, still has a market capitalization of about $444 billion. Privately owned Airbnb is laying off about 25.3% of his workforce, about 1,900 employees. Company cited revenue declines and as a need to curtail costs. They were supposed to go public this year. Missed out by a year or two, didn't they? Uber surged 11% to $30.93 on Thursday. They're claiming that the downside or the collapse in the ride-sharing revenue that they were receiving actually has recovered a bit. So now they're saying that they're probably going to take a few quarters to become profitable, not a few years. And Neiman Marcus, the high-end department store, has received court approval to access $675 million as is debtor-in-process financing, allowing the business to continue during the Chapter 11 bankruptcy proceedings and enabling it to pay employees and vendors. A lot of us are going to be able to find some deals on clothes and other things as a lot of these companies are liquidating. In trade news, China and the U.S. trade representatives discussed Phase 1 trade deal on Friday. China says that they are agreeing to improve the environment for implementation, while the U.S. is saying that both sides are expected to meet their obligations. In technology, the head of the International Energy Agency, Faith Birol, is pushing a technology called green hydrogen, which is extracted from water through electrolysis. Energy intensive, but a lot of proponents are saying that with infrastructure spending and more demand, it could definitely bring the cost down and it could potentially be viable. In investment news, France's President Macron is saying that the French people are going to be unlikely to take any major foreign trips this year, even trips within Europe, as that may be curtailed to try to stop the second wave of the coronavirus. And in Orlando tourism, Orlando is mostly on tourism. If you guys didn't know, Disney is there, also Universal Studios and other parks. They generate over $75 billion a year in economic activity in in Orlando, which is the Central Florida area. They receive some 75 million visitors a year. 41% of the region's workforce is in tourism, as the industry generates $5.8 billion in local and state tax revenue. Disney's by far the largest player, and they're taking quite a hit now because obviously tourism has taken a huge collapse. India is trying to push and lure quite a few U.S. businesses out of China due to the fact that the coronavirus. We have countries like Japan, Europe, and even the U.S. talking about bringing their supply chains home or out of China. They're offering a lot of incentives to manufacturers of medical equipment, food processing units, textiles, leather, and other auto part manufacturers. EU is planning to cut its dependence on Chinese suppliers, and Japan also is setting aside $2.2 billion to be able to help shift factories out of China. Tourism is contributing nearly 1/10 of all of the economic output in the EU. It's one of the hardest hit sectors due to the global pandemic. In my personal opinion, these aren't official numbers from anybody. I think a country like Spain, for example, that hasn't been very, let's say, conducive to industry and business. I think that, the tourism there can reach up to 20% of the economy. All of that obviously is grounded due to the travel. Spain, if you didn't know, is the second most visited country in the world, right after France. US used to be there number 2. It's now at number 3. Germany and other member states are now urging to change the suspension of an EU rules that force airlines and also the hospitality industry for full refunds for canceled flights and trip instead of vouchers for future travel. And international events, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is saying that the authorities have captured 2 U.S. citizens and detained them that were U.S. military veterans that have tried to do a failed armed incursion. Maduro also states that the 13 terrorists that were arrested allegedly involved in a U.S. coordinated plot to oust him, even though Trump is saying that if they were to do that, they would send the army in. The U.K. officially overtakes Italy as the most killed, the population has the most deaths that comes from the coronavirus, increases a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister Johnson to respond to the crisis. Remember, he actually did have it and recovered from it. Asia now accounts for 7% of the global cases, if you can trust China's numbers, 40% from Europe and 34% from North America. And the U.S. issued a new rule on Friday resulting in tightening visa guidelines for Chinese journalists. They're obviously pointing the finger at China, saying that it's in response to what they're doing. As usual, it's always the finger pointing back and forth. And in unusual facts this week, murder hornets were first seen in Washington State in December that are from Japan. They're actually huge. Like, if you look at somebody's hand, they can be about this big, let me put this here, about 2 inches in length. And they can wipe out beehives. If you guys don't know, we rely on bees for our food industry because they're the ones that go and they pollinate our agriculture. The hornets can wipe out entire hives of honeybees in a matter of hours. And the curved stingers can inflict venom, potentially lethal to humans, as about 50 people a year die from the attacks from these murder hornets in Japan. And they actually bite you through the keeper zoots. They're super aggressive. Lord & Taylor, which is the oldest U.S. department store, which was founded in 1826, is preparing to liquidate its inventory as soon as the 38 stores reopen. Again, more deals on clothes for those of you guys that want to get into that. Russian soldiers are supposedly operating drones over Venezuela to be able to search search for members of a paramilitary force that led a failed invasion, as they're saying last week. And Queen Elizabeth II, in a rare televised address, brought together the themes of wartime and the coronavirus. The 94-year-old British monarch led tributes to veterans of World War II. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And also, don't forget to leave your like.